Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're doing a deep dive into something super intriguing, collective action.
Oh, yeah, this is going to be good.
It's really fascinating because it's about how groups come together to, make a change. And we've got academic papers, real-world stuff from Chile, even some visuals lined up for this deep dive.
And it's a topic that deserves a closer look because it's not always as simple as it seems, is it? Like, we tend to think, okay, if everyone has the same goal, then naturally they'll team up and get things done.
Right. If everyone benefits, everyone pitches in.
Right,
Makes sense.
right.
But then, boom, along comes economist Mancur Olson with his theory. And suddenly we're like, wait a minute, what's going on here?
Yeah, Olson, he was something else. Basically, he argued that when it comes to collective action, bigger groups, they actually have some inherent disadvantages.
Really? That's so interesting.
It's all about the numbers, you see. Olson said that as a group gets bigger, the individual benefit each person gets from taking action, it actually shrinks.
So it's like, imagine ordering a pizza with like a ton of people. The more people sharing, the smaller your slice gets.
Exactly. And just like with that pizza, people start thinking, hold on, is my tiny bit of effort really going to make a difference in this massive group? Everyone's being rational, right? Trying to get the most out of their own efforts.
Oh, totally. Which leads us to the free rider problem. Like when you're doing a group project and you're kind of tempted to slack off a bit, hoping the others will just handle it.
Exactly. When there are enough people involved, it's tempting to think, well, even if I don't contribute, I'll still reap the benefits. Like sneaking onto that public bus without paying if enough other people are paying, the system works. For a while, anyway.
Okay, so we've got Olson's theory, but where do we actually see this playing out in the real world?
Well, let's take a trip down to Chile for a moment. Some really interesting case studies there. Remember those price-fixing scandals with the pharmacies and the paper industry?
Oh, right, yeah.
Classic examples of this collective action dilemma in action.
So in Chile, we have these small groups of companies, right? Both in the pharmacy and the paper industries, and they managed to like team up and jack up those prices, didn't they?
And for a while, they were really getting away with it. Meanwhile, you've got millions of consumers all feeling the pinch of these inflated prices, but what's any one person going to do about it, right?
You'd feel pretty powerless, wouldn't you? Like
Yeah.
going up against this huge industry all on your own.
Exactly. The effort is huge. The potential payoff for any individual is tiny. That's the classic collective action problem right there. And those companies, they knew it. Now, for the pharmacies, think about it. The potential profits from colluding, huge. And all they had to do was coordinate with a handful of other players. Not that difficult. Plus, when you're dealing with a small group of business owners, it's easier to keep tabs on each other, right?
Yeah, you can tell if someone's breaking the pact, undercutting the prices they all agreed on. It's like way easier to keep a small group in line. I remember we have that visual, that one showing the difference between organizing a small, tight-knit group versus a massive, scattered one. It's practically impossible to get everyone on the same page when you're dealing with a huge number of people.
It really is. But here's where the Chilean case gets interesting, see, because this is where these consumer organizations, they step onto the scene. Groups like Connecticut, that's the National Corporation for Consumer Protection, and ODQ, the Organization of Consumers and Users, they became the champions for everyday people.
It's like they're taking on the role of David, going up against the Goliath of these big industries.
That's a great way to put it. They were able to break through those individual barriers that were stopping people from acting on their own. They gave a voice to all those individual consumers who felt powerless. And just as importantly, they had the resources to take on those legal battles.
They did, and they won too, didn't they? Secured some compensation for the people who'd been affected by those price-fixing schemes.
They did. It really shows that even when you're up against these massive industries, collective action, it can work. It's not always easy, that's for sure, but it can happen.
Yeah, it's pretty inspiring when you think about it. So we've talked about the economic side of things, but what about when we're talking about broader social change? Like social movements. What about those?
Well, that's an area where I think people sometimes misunderstand collective action. We tend to picture these huge protests, marches, demonstrations, but there's a lot more to it than just taking to the streets, isn't there?
Right. It's like we see the tip of the iceberg, but underneath it all, there are all these complex mechanisms that are like driving the movement forward.
Exactly. We have to remember the difference between movements, which are usually time limited, right, and organizations, which are built to last. Think about the student movement in Chile, those massive protests that were all over the news.
Oh, right. Yeah, there was so much energy, so much passion. It was incredible to see.
And while those huge demonstrations might have died down, the student organizations, those are still going strong. Like FECH, the group that represents students from the University of Chile, and FEUC, which is for students from the Pontifical Catholic University of Chile, they're still very much active. They provide structure, you see, that continuity long after the initial wave of protests has passed.
Like they provide that lasting impact even after the initial, wave of energy has subsided.
Yeah.
But that makes you wonder, how do you actually measure a movement's success? I mean, is it just about, did they get what they wanted? Like yes or no? Or is there more to it than that?
That's the big question, isn't it? Because a lot of times the real impact, it goes way beyond just checking things off a list of demands. It's about creating those ripples that keep going. Think about something like the movement for the 8-hour workday. I mean, they didn't just snap their fingers and suddenly everyone had shorter hours.
No, it took like decades, didn't it? Decades of people organizing and protesting and advocating.
Exactly. And even if they didn't achieve all their goals right away, that movement, it completely changed how people thought about workers' rights. It was like planting seeds for the future.
Right. Even if they didn't win every battle at the time, they changed the whole conversation.
Exactly. A movement might not overturn a law immediately, but it can shift public opinion. It can empower people, give them a voice, and even inspire a whole new generation of activists to keep fighting. Those are huge victories in themselves.
Absolutely. It's like that saying, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And speaking of committed citizens, we've got to talk about the role of leadership, right? Because a strong leader can be so powerful, so inspiring for a movement.
Totally. The people at the helm, they can make or break a movement. Their charisma, their strategy, their ability to bring people together, it all matters. Think about leaders like Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. Their commitment to nonviolent resistance, even when they were facing such intense opposition, that's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, their courage is contagious, isn't it? It inspires others to act. But it's not just about the activists, is it? Governments, those in power, they're not just passive observers in all of this.
Well, absolutely not. They're part of this dance, too. Sometimes they try to co-opt a movement, maybe adopt some of its demands to try and maintain stability. And then, of course, sometimes they try to repress movements, especially if they see them as a threat.
It's a constant back and forth, isn't it? All this talk about movements and change, it makes me think about how we participate in all of this today. We've gone from town squares to Twitter squares, haven't we? I mean, with social media and what some people call slacktivism, just clicking like or sharing a post, does that online activity actually translate into real-world change? Or is it just, an illusion of action?
It's a question that definitely sparks a lot of debate. I mean, there's no doubt that social media can mobilize people incredibly quickly, and it can shine a light on injustices that might have otherwise gone unnoticed. But it also makes you wonder about how deep that engagement really goes. I mean, is a retweet enough to create lasting change?
Right. It's something to think about for sure.
Uh-huh.
Wow, we've really covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've gone from the theory of collective action to real-world examples, from the streets of Santiago to those halls of power.
It really highlights how central collective action is to the human experience. It's messy, it's complicated, but it's also how we achieve progress, how we make our voices heard, and how societies evolve.
It's been fantastic discussing all this with you today. And
Yeah.
for everyone listening, keep asking those questions, keep exploring those complexities, and remember, your voice, your actions, they really do matter. Until next time.